Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla. I am a writer and freelance web developer that makes mostly websites for authors. So if you're interested, let me know. It's currently Monday, April the 3rd. It is 4 p.m. I have already worked quite a bit today. If you watched my last video, you know that I finally got through the kind of writer's block that I was having with my Act 2 of Between the Waves, and I finally got through it. I wrote out enough for me to basically get to the end of the book, and then we can get into revisions and actually figure out some of the major issues that I just haven't been able to fix yet, so that's very exciting. So most of the writing for this week is going to be focused on getting that finished so that we can actually jump into the revision process of Between the Waves. I also asked for some questions, so throughout the video I'm going to be answering those questions and do kind of like a little Q&A vlog type situation. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask them on this vlog and then I can always answer them in the next video. So we're just gonna dive right into some writing sprints and get started and see how much we can get done. Okay, so I've just gone and added about 4,000 words to the manuscript, which is great. I will say a large chunk of them was kind of a scene that had already been written, but I've like rewritten it. And then I did some dictating. I don't dictate often, but I've been struggling to like jump back into this, so I figured I'd give it a shot and see if it worked. And I got about 1,500 words done from dictating. So pretty happy with that. And now I figured I'd answer a couple questions. Alfie asked, what's the hardest part of the writing process in the fantasy genre? For me, if you had asked just like the most difficult part of the writing process for me in general, it would be a different answer. But because you specified in the fantasy genre, it's gotta be world building, just because with fantasy, you are creating an entire world where you're coming up with the rules, you're coming up with the maps, like you're coming up with the geography of the world, you're coming up with the magic system. So that all comes from your own brain, and then you also kind of have to like keep it consistent. You have to make it make sense. So I would say that the most difficult part is coming up with an entire world and coming up with a magic system in a fantasy world, and then keeping track of it and making sure that you're staying consistent.
On a weary line, too scared to trust you and jump down.
I had the most wonderful walk this morning. I grabbed a little coffee, decaf coffee, because I am still trying to avoid caffeine. Not necessarily entirely, because I do still drink caffeine, and I'll drink like matcha, which has caffeine, and I'll drink teas and stuff. But I'm trying to limit the caffeine because it was getting too much for a while there. But I had a great morning. I've been working for the past couple hours. I did a bit of client work this morning. I got a revised design sent out to one of my clients, and then I started working on another design for a second client. I also checked my form, and there is an 8th person now who has signed up, which is great. I still need to get back to people, so that is on my list for today. I thought I'd answer a couple more questions before I jump back into work, just to have a little break. So Lara asked, what do you enjoy most about freelancing? And as of right now, how it's been going, my favorite thing about freelancing, and also the reason that I have been like pushing myself so hard to be entirely freelancing, is genuinely just the freedom of time that it gives me. For basically my entire life, leading up to last year, I was trying to force myself to follow certain schedules, whether that's a 9-to-5 job, going to school or university, like high school kind of 8 to 4 days, or university. I was always trying to like force myself and my productivity and my energy levels to follow those rhythms, because those were the systems that are set in place, and those are generally the systems that we kind of like follow in our society in Canada, at least, or in Western society mostly. I won't go too far into it because I do have quite a few issues with like that structure of society. It doesn't really work for me. It doesn't really work effectively for my brain and my productivity. So my favorite thing about freelancing is not having to force myself into one of those structures. Like when I'm freelancing, if inspiration strikes in the middle of the night, I can stay up all night if I want to get my work done, and there's no consequence for it. Like I can still get the sleep that I need to be productive again the next day and to do the things I want to do again the next day. And I can adjust my schedule if I need to. Like if I finish my work in 3 days, I can have 4 days off, and I can do that multiple times in a row. I can do that every single week if I want to do that. And that gives me more freedom and more time to recharge if I'm needing it that particular month. There are like, I could go on forever about the time freedom and flexibility that comes with freelancing, but that is absolutely my favorite part about freelancing, and it is wildly beneficial for me. So I'm just so grateful that I get to freelance. Lara also asked, has your process for writing manuscripts changed for each one? If so, how? It has changed technically. I don't really know how to explain how it's changed though, because basically I'm just winging it every single time. When I started writing manuscripts, I was pantsing everything. And that's also why I wasn't really finishing manuscripts, because I had an idea, it popped into my head, I started writing and I pantsed the whole thing. And usually the whole thing was anywhere from like 2,000 to 10,000 words or so, and then I would stop. So that's how I initially started working on manuscripts. When I did Blood of Amberum, which I started in 2021, and I've said this before, that was kind of like the first manuscript that I started writing for the purpose of hoping to publish my work one day. I actually put quite a bit of planning into it. I went through and I did that 3-act 9 sequence structure, I think. It was a little bit too much structure for me. I prefer something that has less beats almost. So I prefer something like a 7-point plot structure, because there's not as much structure for me to have to follow, and I still have the freedom to like explore. And also for Blood of Amberum, I basically estimated that I would have, I think it was between 30 and 40 chapters. So I like literally wrote out chapters 1 to 35, I think it was. And then I wrote down the plot point for every single chapter. Some of those were wildly different by the time we got to like the 3rd draft. They were not the same. But I literally went through and I was throwing ideas. Like I was just filling out what was going to happen in every single chapter, even if it was just a couple lines or a single line. That was what I did. I got the draft done, but the reason that Blood of Amberum got shelved, if you don't know, or if you weren't, I think I mentioned it in a video, but the reason that it got shelved was because I felt like Blood of Amberum was all of the ideas that I had in the pipeline and that I had been saving up for the last decade, when I hadn't really been writing as many stories or getting into as many fantasy stories. And it felt like all of that pipeline gunk shoved into one manuscript, because I was just so excited about writing a full-length novel, you know? So that's why Blood of Amberum got shelved. And I also think that part of that was because of how I set up the novel. Like I went through and I did a lot of plotting, and then when I wrote it, I wanted to include everything that I plotted, which in hindsight wasn't necessarily the best idea, because it is truly a novel just full of a whole bunch of different ideas. It's a bit cleaner now after like a bit of editing and a couple drafts and beta readers and stuff, but like it's still it doesn't quite know its place because of how many ideas went into it. So Between the Waves kind of started as scenes popping into my head and me writing out those scenes. So it was a very loosely plotted novel. And then I also think that the reason it's been so difficult to get it to a point where the story and the plot is actually clear to me is because I started it for NaNoWriMo. Basically pantsed it and just grabbed whatever idea I possibly could in order to hit the word counts. So yeah, it started as a loose plot and then pantsing hardcore during NaNoWriMo. And I do think that because of that whole process, that's why I'm struggling a lot now to clean it up and sort it out and figure out what the hell is actually going on in that book. That's how my manuscript writing process has changed so far. It's been different for every single one. My camera died while I was finishing up that question, but yeah, basically I think it'll be different for every single manuscript. I think the more manuscripts I write, the closer I'll get to having a similar structure that I follow for each manuscript, but I honestly think it's gonna change depending on the project no matter what. I'm gonna do some yoga because I've been staring at my computer for far too long. And I need to do some movement, and then I'm gonna finally, today was a big work day, but I'm gonna finally jump into some writing.
Close your eyes, get out of your skin. Only this matters, let it in. If I could, I would be right here with you. In this world of ticking clocks, I hope I'm getting through.
I feel like I'm having little breakthroughs. I'm not at the point yet where everything is sorted and everything's wonderful and I know exactly what's happening, but I've had enough small breakthroughs that I can get to the end of the novel now. I just went and I basically wrote out the next 5 or 6 chapters, which basically the spot where I stopped writing the other night was just before The Dark Night of the Soul. I wrote out kind of just like bullet points or a short paragraph explanation of what was going to happen in each chapter. So I planned out The Dark Night of the Soul, things that need to happen there and leading up to it, things that need to happen after in order to get to the climax. I wrote the climax out over like 2 chapters or so, and I kind of wrote out some quotes that I want to be in there, like some dialogue that needs to be said. And then I got to the chapter immediately after the climax I have also planned out, and then there's just like probably 2 or so wrap-up chapters, I would say, that need to happen after that I think are going to be pretty easy to write. Like I didn't plan those ones out because I think I need to do the climax and I need to write the climax and write out the things that are going to be said and told and revealed and whatnot before I can kind of plan out that very last chapter. So I don't think I'm even going to plan it out. I'll probably just write it because at that point I'll have written the climax, which means that we're so close to Act 3. We are moments away from being in Act 3. I'm going to do some more writing tonight, so I will probably hit Act 3 tonight. So I thought I'd answer the last 2 questions that were on my Q&A post. I'm still going to post for a Q&A on Instagram. I think I actually ended up not doing that because I got enough questions on here to like definitely fill a video, so I didn't want it to be too long. Saskia asked, what do you think about multiple projects at the same time? I think it's wonderful. I often work on multiple projects at the same time. I have the main one that I'm focusing on, which is Between the Waves. So I'm currently in draft 2/3. Still don't know what to call it. I don't know. I'll actually call it something next time, maybe draft 3 of Between the Waves, the first novel in a trilogy at minimum. And I will soon be working on planning out and kind of structuring the next 2 books just to make sure that I have like an arc over the course of the trilogy as well as within each book. So I'm working on those. I'm also currently working on a poetry collection, and that is kind of just like when I'm feeling emotional and poetic, I will write some poetry that is going to be going into a poetry collection. And then I am also working on Project Raven, which is kind of like my fun project that when I just need like a fun, doesn't really matter, but maybe we'll publish one day project, I'll work on Project Raven. And then next month, I'm going to start planning for a standalone novel that I want to be writing over the course of the next year or so that I can query it next year for traditional publishing. So I think I'll make an entire vlog focused around working on multiple projects at a time. It's what works for me, just because I always have so many ideas going on, and I find that when I idea jump and work on multiple projects, it actually opens up creativity for all of the projects as a whole. So like if I'm struggling with Between the Waves and I go and spend a couple days working on Project Raven, usually something will clear up for Between the Waves, and then I can switch back to that project. So I really enjoy it because it works for me. So that's going to be the end of this video, but I hope that you enjoyed the video and you enjoyed my answers to some of the questions. I'll probably do more Q&As in the future because I do want to ask on Instagram and see if there's any like questions over there as well. But I hope everyone's Camp NaNoWriMo is going well. The next vlog should be a Camp NaNoWriMo focused vlog, but I hope that you all enjoyed this. Thank you so much for being here and for watching the video and liking and subscribing and interacting and doing all the fun stuff. Don't forget to smile, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.